I fled Russia in 2024, and one of the strangest things right now is to watch what is happening to the Russian internet. Because I remember a very different Russia. I grew up in a country where I could watch almost anything I wanted. That may sound hard to believe now, but it's true. I grew up watching Disney Channel, shows like Hannah Montana, Wizards of Waverly Place, and Disney Channel had a huge influence on my life. I watched Hollywood movies. I played whatever games I wanted. I was basically raised on global internet culture. American movies, Western music, YouTube, games, memes. Big cities, small villages in Russia and Siberia could still watch Disney Channel, could still be connected to the Western world. And let me tell you, it was very popular. It was so popular. Disney Channel had huge success in Russia. I even remember seeing things on television that today's Russian regime would probably consider unacceptable or dangerous, or they could just label it as a terrorist organization, as they did with LGBTQ plus community. I remember two men kissing in a Hollywood movie where that aired in the evening at the time where ordinary Russian families would be sitting at home after work watching TV. Nobody was pretending that Russia was North Korea. Nobody was pretending that the country had to be sealed off from the world. And that matters because there's a lazy myth outside of Russia that the country was always closed, always isolated, always living under total information control. That is not true. At least not for me, not for my childhood. Early post Soviet Russia was chaotic, corrupt, unequal, and politically unstable. But it was also open in many real ways. In the early 2000s, people could still go outside with a sign in their hands and say what they thought. Not perfectly, not without risk, not in some fantasy version of democracy, but there was real space, there was air, there was movement. And this is exactly why this story matters. Because what is happening now is not normal. It is not just another restriction. It is not just the government regulating the internet. Russia went full dictatorship mode. And it did not happen overnight. It happened slowly. Very slowly, but boy, very surely. For years, Putin and his regime kept tightening control over media, politics, civil society, and public life. But the internet was different. The internet stayed messy, open, difficult to fully control. It remained one place where Russians still could reach beyond state television, beyond propaganda, beyond official lies. This is exactly why the regime had to go after it. That gradual tightening became a deliberate state project with 2019 Sovereign Internet Law, which required telecom operators to install equipment that let the authorities filter and control traffic more directly. Russian independent media Meduza described it as a system that would force providers to install special equipment so Roskomnadzor could block content more effectively. If you don't know what Roskomnadzor is, it's basically a big organization that oversees the entire internet, the entire traffic, and everything that has to do with the internet. This is one of the Putin's machines. In my view, Russia is copying China. Not perfectly, not at the same level, but the direction is obvious. Even Medusa reported years ago that Russian officials and pro-Kremlin voices openly admired the Chinese model of the internet regulation and wanted at least some of its elements inside Russia. Other analyses have said the same thing. Russia's cyber sovereignty model has increasingly mimicking China's approach to digital control. And once you understand that, everything that happened later makes sense. Because Putin does not just want to block a few websites, he wants full control of what people see, what people think, what they're allowed to discuss, what they're talking to, and how easily they can reach the outside world. This is what authoritarian regimes do. They do not just punish speech, they build system that shapes reality itself. Look at what happened after Putin invaded Ukraine. That was the turning point when everything went downhill. Why? Because once Putin launched that war, the regime needed total narrative control. It needed to hide reality, justify aggression, and keep spreading lies about what Russia was doing in Ukraine. Independent media were blocked. Journalists were pushed out. New censorship law came in. The state did not just want loyalty, it wanted monopoly. Freedom House said internet freedom in Russia worsened further after the invasion, while Human Rights Watch described the current system as a long-term state policy aimed at isolating the population from the global internet. And then came the crackdown on the tools that people actually use every day. For a while, YouTube remained one of the last major spaces where Russians could still watch opposition voices, independent reporting, interviews, investigations, and political commentary. That made YouTube a problem for the regime. Medusa reported in 2024 that YouTube was being deliberately slowed down. Another independent media later wrote that the slowdown darkened the outlook for freedom of speech in Russia. And this is important. Modern day censorship is not always just a quick ban. Sometimes the regime does something smarter. It makes a service slow, unstable, annoying, unreliable, not fully gone. Just painful enough that millions of people stop using it. That way, the state gets the result of censorship without always paying the political price of an official prohibition. Human Rights Watch and Cloudflare both describe this broader Russian strategy as one of threatening, blocking, and selective technical disruptions, not just simple yes or no access. And it did not stop with YouTube. Signal was blocked. Discord was blocked. Viber was blocked. WhatsApp is blocked. Freedom House 2025 report and Human Rights Watch both describe this escalation very clearly. The state was not just targeting media outlets anymore, it was targeting communication itself. It was going after the tools people use to speak privately, organize, share information, and bypass censorship. Then the regime went after VPNs even harder. That is another huge part of this story, because once the government blocks a platform, the next question is obvious. Can people still get around it? If the answer is yes, that the system is not fully under control. Reuters reported this month that Russia has been taking down dozens of VPN, while Human Rights Watch warned that many Russians either do not know how to use VPNs or are afraid to rely on them. That creates exactly the kind of digital environment the Kremlin wants. One where access to real information becomes possible only for the determined, the technically skilled, the brave. A land of the free. Everyone else is gradually pushed back to the bubble of propaganda. And then the censorship moved deeper into the infrastructure itself. Cloudflare said that in 2025 that Russian internet providers were throttling connections to Cloudflare protected websites so severely that users could often load only the first 16 kilobytes of data. Think about how extreme that is. A website does not simply say blocked. It starts loading and then it effectively dies. That is not just censorship. That is engineering dysfunction. Independent media reported on March 2026 that mobile internet had been completely down every day in parts of central Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other major cities. Human Rights Watch documented the same broader trend of shutdowns and disruptions, saying that they interfere with communication, banking, transportation, and basic daily life. Sometimes can't even schedule a doctor's appointment. Once a state can interrupt the internet itself whenever it wants, this is no longer only about media control. It becomes a system of direct social control. And while the Russian regime trying to attack and destroy foreign social medias, it also trying to replace them with Russians' own. In August 2025, Reuters reported that Russia ordered the state-backed messenger Max to be pre-installed on phones and tablets across the country. This is how authoritarian systems work. First, they weaken independent or foreign platforms. Then they push people towards domestic alternatives that are easier to supervise, pressure, and possibly monitor. Then in February 2026, things escalated again. Medusa reported that YouTube and other major platforms, including WhatsApp-related domains, disappeared from Russia's national DNC records. Another independent media reported that WhatsApp had been fully blocked. That means that Russian regime was not only blocking destinations, it was tampering with the internet's address system inside Russia. Now that is extraordinary level of control. So when I say Russia went completely full dictatorship mode, it's not even close to China. It's aiming to be North Korea. This is what dictatorship looks like in digital era. It's not always one giant blockout. It is a slower process, a more systematic one. A government builds technical tools, passes laws, attacks independent media, throttles platforms, blocks messengers, pressures VPNs, promotes states approved apps, and slowly trains the population to live inside a smaller, more controlled version of reality. They're scared of truth. They're scared losing their power because they are a bunch of scumbags. But as Charlie Chaplin said in his final monologue in the movie The Great Dictator, the old dictators die with the passion. That what actually a good part about dictators is that they die. Because open information is dangerous to dictatorships, because a person who can see the truth is harder to control, and because a country connected to the world is much harder to lock inside one man's lies.